I received the divorce papers in my inbox while I was still in the desert. 13 years of marriage came to an end in a PDF attachment. My name is Morgan, 41 years old, and I'm a staff sergeant in the 85th Airborne Division. I had been in Jalalabad for 4 months when Amelie decided she had had enough of waiting. The subject line read, "Let's be adults about this." The message itself was a mere 3 sentences long. She had already filed the paperwork. She had already emptied our joint account. She had already moved her new boyfriend, Murphy, into our home in Spokane. I read the email twice, closed my laptop, took a shower in the communal stall, got dressed for my shift, and said nothing to anyone. When I returned to my bunk that evening, I replied with a single word, "Understood," and that was it. No arguments, no pleas, no threats. Wilson, my bunkmate, noticed something was off. "You good, buddy?" he asked, not looking up from his book. "Yeah," I said. "Just some stuff back home." He nodded, and that was the end of it. Military guys know when to let things be. To be honest, I wasn't surprised. 6 months before my deployment, things had changed. Little things. Amelie stopped asking about my day, started working late at the dental office where she answered phone calls, began hitting the gym 3 times a week but never seemed to break a sweat. New clothes, new friends I never met, new passwords on her phone. I didn't confront her, didn't start checking her messages or tracking her movements. That's not who I am. But I wasn't blind either, so I made some quiet moves of my own. Nothing dramatic, just precautions. I secured important documents in a storage unit across town. My birth certificate, marriage certificate, the deed to our house in my name, thanks to my VA loan, military benefit paperwork. I moved my grandfather's watch and my mother's old silver into that same unit. Things that mattered. I also opened a separate account at another bank and started transferring a portion of my paycheck there. Not enough for her to notice, but enough so I wouldn't be starting from scratch if things went south. The night before I left, she hugged me at the airport and said, "Take care of yourself, okay?" Her eyes were dry, as if she were saying goodbye to a colleague rather than a husband heading off to war. I should have known then, but part of me still hoped I was wrong. I wasn't wrong. What she didn't know was that I had prepared for this moment, and she didn't understand that I never start fights. But I finished them. I met Amelie at a friend's barbecue in 2010. I was home between tours, crashing at my buddy Jason's place in Spokane. She was finishing nursing school but was working as an administrator at a dental clinic instead. "Less stress," she said. We got married 8 months later. Amelie used to say she was proud of my service, though she never fully understood it. Now, as I sit here in the desert, the weight of her betrayal hangs heavy on my heart, a stark contrast to the camaraderie of my fellow soldiers. I had fought for my country, but now I was fighting for my own peace of mind, grappling with the loss of a life I thought I knew. Her father was a bank manager, her brother a pharmacist. There were no soldiers in her family. She often asked when I would get a real job, not understanding that after 15 years, the Army had become my career, not just a way to pass the time. We bought our house in 2014. Nothing fancy, but it was ours. 3 bedrooms, a small yard, a quiet neighborhood. My name was the only one on the mortgage since the VA loan was in my name, but I added her to the deed because that's what married people do. They share their lives. My dad passed away a year after we got married, a heart attack while shoveling snow. My mom followed 3 years later, succumbing to lung cancer, despite never having smoked a day in her life. They left me a little money, not a fortune, but enough for Amelie and me to pay off her student loans and still have a safety net. During our marriage, I deployed to Iraq 4 times and Afghanistan twice. Each time I returned home, Amelie seemed a little more distant, a little more anxious, as if she were playing a role she had outgrown. "I didn't sign up to be a military wife," she told me one night after I mentioned the possibility of another 4-year deployment. "I'm tired of being alone all the time." I understood, I really did. But the Army was the only place I felt truly at home. I was good at my job. People depended on me. But in 2019, things began to shift, starting with small irritations. Emily grew annoyed when I called her during girls' nights. started talking about how her friend Melissa had divorced her husband and was now living her best life, began commenting that we had nothing in common anymore. I suggested we see a counselor. She insisted we were fine, just going through a phase. Then came the late nights at work, weekends with friends I'd never met, new clothes, a gym membership she rarely used. I should have confronted her. But that's not how I operate. I never have. My father taught me to think before I speak, to be sure before I act. So I watched and prepared quietly because my gut told me something was coming. And in this life, you learn to trust your instincts. 2 weeks after I received the divorce email, I was sitting in the mess hall when my phone buzzed. A notification from our banking app, another withdrawal, $8,500, almost everything we had left. I set down my fork and opened the app. The balance in our joint account had plummeted to $212.37. Our savings, $47,000 that we had built over the years, completely vanished, transferred to an account I didn't know existed. Murphy, one of the guys from my unit, glanced over. Bad news? I quickly locked my phone. No, just some accounting stuff. That evening, I called our bank from the base phone center. It turned out Amelie had been transferring money for weeks. Small amounts at first, then larger ones. The big transfers began the day after my deployment. I hung up and stood in the hallway for a long time, watching the guys laugh, calling their kids, wives, parents. Around me, life was normal while mine was burning to the ground. That's when Wilson found me. Heard from Alvarez that you look like you've seen a ghost at dinner, he said. What's up? I usually didn't share personal things, but once Wilson had pulled me out of a tight spot in Jalalabad. I trusted him. My wife drained our accounts and moved her boyfriend into our house, I said. She sent the divorce papers while I was on patrol last week. Wilson didn't offer me the usual platitudes. No, sorry, or that's rude, or you'll find someone better. He simply asked, what's your plan? I wasn't sure yet, I replied. He nodded. Let me know if you need anything. That night, I couldn't sleep. I pulled out my laptop and logged into our home security system, something Amelie had probably forgotten I could access remotely. The cameras showed a strange truck in our driveway, a guy I'd never seen before walking our dog, using my coffee mug, wearing a Seahawks hoodie. And there was Amelie, laughing in the kitchen I had remodeled during my last leave. Something shifted inside me. Not quite anger, something colder, clearer. I closed the laptop and pulled out my phone, making a list. Call James, my Army buddy who had become a lawyer. Review the terms of the VA loan. Contact the Master Sergeant about emergency leave. Look into the refinancing documents Amelie had casually mentioned last year. Check the security on my military retirement accounts. I wasn't sad anymore. I didn't even feel angry. I felt focused, as if I were planning a mission. This was no longer about emotions. It was about strategy. At 5 a.m., before my shift started, I sent an email to James with the subject line, Need legal help. Calm and urgent. His reply came an hour later. Call me. Secure line only. When I hung up, I knew exactly what I needed to do. I didn't need to shout. I didn't need to threaten. I didn't even need to confront her. I just needed to wait and watch, letting her own actions become her trap. 2 months later, I was back on American soil. I didn't tell Amelie I was coming home. I didn't call. I didn't write. I simply checked into a motel in downtown Spokane under a different name and contacted James. We met at a diner 10 miles out of town. You look like hell, he said, sliding into the booth. I think I do too, I replied. James handed me a folder. We've got everything we discussed. Title deed, loan documents, bank statements, and more. He pulled out a separate sheet. Found something interesting while digging through your finances. It was a refinancing application with my signature. Except it wasn't my signature, not quite. Someone had tried to forge it but missed some details. The middle initial was wrong and the stroke pattern wasn't mine. Amelie did this? I asked, though I already knew the answer. James nodded. 3 months ago, used the equity to pull out $30,000. A chill ran down my spine. This was more than just betrayal, it was theft. And now I had the evidence I needed. The pieces were falling into place, and I was ready to make my move. It requires your signature since the VA loan is only in your name. She forged my signature, took out a loan against our house, then paid off her bills and divorced me, I said. A busy woman. It gets better, James replied. She listed her boyfriend as a co-borrower. He has a record. 2 DUIs and a fraud charge from 2019. I took a deep breath. What options do I have? A few, James said. But first, we need to figure out what you want. I thought about it. I want what legally belongs to me, and I want her to understand the consequences. James smiled. Then here's what we're going to do. The next day, I drove past our house. Her boyfriend's truck was gone, but Amelie's car was still in the driveway. I parked on the street and watched for a while, contemplating knocking on the door and confronting her. But that wasn't part of the plan. Instead, I went to the bank, met with the loan officer who had handled the refinancing, showed him my military ID, presented my real signature from my driver's license, and revealed the forged documents. His face went pale. I need to report this immediately. I understand, I said. I had already filed a police report. That evening I received a message from Amelie. Who did you talk to at the bank? Murphy said someone was asking questions. I didn't respond. The next day I went to the county clerk's office, filed documents contesting the refinancing due to fraud, and registered an official notice that no changes to the property could be made without my presence. 2 days later, Amelie called. I sent her to voicemail. Morgan, we need to talk. I felt a strange mix of satisfaction and resolve. She had crossed a line, and now the game was on. I was no longer the man she could walk all over. I was ready to fight for what was mine, and I wouldn't back down. The bank called about the house. What are you doing? If this is about the divorce, we can discuss it like adults. Like adults. The same words from her email. I didn't respond. James called later that day. They've frozen the funds from the refinancing, and that's not all. Your wife's boyfriend was driving your truck, right? The one in your name? Yeah. This morning, he was pulled over for driving with a suspended license due to a DUI. They confiscated the vehicle. Good, I said. There was something interesting in the truck, too. Prescription pads from the dental office where Amelie works. They weren't blank. I closed my eyes. She's stealing prescription drugs? Looks like it. The police are investigating. I hung up and sat on the edge of the bed in the motel. This was more than I had expected. Part of me wanted to call Amelie to warn her. Old habits die hard. But then I remembered the footage from the security cameras. My house, my dog, my life. Handing it over as if it meant nothing. Well, this was the path now. I couldn't turn back, and honestly, I didn't want to. The next morning, I met with the fraud investigator. His name was Thompson, a short guy with tired eyes and a coffee stain on his tie. This happens more often than you think, he said, scattering documents across his desk. Spouse deploys. Other spouse sees an opportunity. What happens next? I asked. We've frozen the funds from the fraudulent refinancing, but there's a problem. Part of the money is already gone. How much? About half, $14,600. I leaned forward. Where did it go? Thompson hesitated. I shouldn't share this information. This is my house. My name was forged. My money was stolen. He slowly nodded, then turned his computer screen toward me. These are the transfers from the refinancing account. I scanned the list. Several transfers to someone named Daniel Spencer. Not Murphy. Someone else I had never heard of. Who is Daniel Spencer? I asked. Thompson shrugged. Not my department, but you should have your lawyer subpoena these documents. I called James as soon as I left the bank. Daniel Spencer, he repeated. Let me run a check. An hour later, he called back. Got it. Daniel Spencer is a real estate agent. Specializes in quick sales, cash deals. She was planning to sell our house, I said. The realization hit me like a physical blow. This was more than just betrayal. It was a calculated move to strip me of everything I had worked for. I felt a surge of determination. I wouldn't let her get away with this. I would fight back, and I would take back what was mine. It looks like it. The deposits were probably a down payment for him to push the listing. But here's where it gets interesting. Spencer has done business with Murphy Ryan before. Murphy Ryan is your wife's boyfriend, right? Yes, they've closed 3 deals together in the last 2 years. I sat on a bench in the park, trying to process this. So it wasn't just that Amelie left me for some guy? This was what, a planned operation? Maybe, James said cautiously. I dug a little into Murphy Ryan. He has a pattern. He works with women going through divorces or spouses of service members. So far, I've found 3 cases. Each time, the woman's house sells significantly below market value to one of Spencer's clients. Ryan gets his cut. And Amelie? Did she know about this? Hard to say. Maybe she's a victim too. Or maybe she's in on it. I buried my face in my hands. This wasn't just about Amelie betraying me. It was something bigger. Something calculated. Other military families had been victimized too. What do we do? I asked. I've already contacted the FBI's Financial Crimes Division, James said. This crosses state lines, involves service members and VA loans. They're interested. That evening, I sat in my motel room with a beer, thinking it all over. I wondered if Amelie had been playing me the entire time we were married, or if she was just caught up in Murphy's scheme. I wondered if it even mattered. My phone buzzed again. Amelie. Morgan, please call me. The bank is saying something about fraud and Murphy was arrested for driving your truck. I don't understand what's happening. I stared at the message for a long time. Then I typed, "Who is Daniel Spencer?" When she started typing, the 3 dots appeared, then stopped, started again, finally stopped. I don't know what you're talking about. $14,600, I wrote. Multiple transfers, house listing? No response for 10 minutes. Then it's not what you think. I turned off my phone and went to sleep. The next morning, James called. The FBI wants to meet. They've been investigating Ryan and Spencer for months. You're not the first, but you might be the case that breaks it. For the first time since I received the divorce letter, I felt something close to satisfaction. Not because my marriage was falling apart, but because the truth was finally coming to light. I met with the FBI agents at their field office in Spokane, Agent Patel and Agent Donovan. They took my statement, made copies of all the documents James and I had gathered. Agent Patel explained that my case helped establish a pattern, showing intent and organization, turning it into a conspiracy rather than isolated incidents. As I spoke, I felt a sense of purpose. This was no longer just about my personal loss. It was about exposing a scheme that had hurt others like me. I was ready to fight back, not just for myself, but for all the victims of this betrayal. What about Amelie? I asked. My wife, my ex-wife. The agents exchanged glances. We're still determining the level of her involvement, Donovan said cautiously. Did she ever mention financial difficulties? Pressure to sell the house? I remembered. She was always saying we were broke, that we needed to cut back. I didn't see the need. Our mortgage payments were quite manageable on my salary. Patel made a note. When did this start? About 6 months ago, roughly when she must have met Murphy. And the refinancing? Donovan asked. She never discussed it with me. She forged my signature while I was on duty. They asked more questions, took more notes. When we finished, Patel handed me her card. We'll be in touch. At the same time, don't confront your wife or Ryan. We need to build this case carefully. I nodded. Understood. That evening, I drove back to our neighborhood, parking down the street from our house. Murphy's truck was back. He must have retrieved it from the impound lot. Emily's car was gone. My phone buzzed. A message from Emily. We need to talk in person. Let's meet tomorrow at Riverfront Park. Call you in the morning. The next day, I showed the text to James over breakfast. Don't go, he advised. Nothing good will come from talking to her right now. I won't, I said, but I want to know what she's up to today while she thinks I'm meeting her. We drove to our house at 9:30 a.m., parking across the street. At 9:45, Emily walked out, got into her car, and drove off toward Riverfront Park. Now what? James asked. Now we wait, I said. 20 minutes later, a car pulled up. A real estate agent's logo on the door. Daniel Spencer. Murphy got out to greet him. They talked in the driveway, then went inside. Should we follow them? James asked. I shook my head. No need. I installed security cameras last year, both inside and out. They upload to cloud storage. James smiled. You didn't mention that before. Just never came up, I said, pulling out my phone. I opened the security app and angled the screen so James could see. Spencer and Murphy were in our living room. Spencer was taking pictures. Murphy was pointing out features of the house. I turned up the volume. It should be listed by the end of the week, Spencer was saying. I already have an interested buyer. Cash offer, as usual. How much? Murphy asked. $420,000. We list for $470,000. They offer $420,000. Everyone's happy. What about the husband? Emily says he's causing problems. I felt a cold knot in my stomach. They were planning to sell our home without my knowledge, without my consent. This was more than just betrayal. It was a calculated scheme to strip me of everything I had worked for. Let's get this on record, I said, my voice steady. We need to document everything. James nodded, his expression serious. We'll make sure the FBI has all of this. They'll need it for their case. As I watched the betrayal unfold on my screen, I felt a surge of determination. I wouldn't let them take my life away from me without a fight. I was ready to take action to reclaim what was rightfully mine. Spencer waved dismissively. Military guys are all the same. They make noise, but they have their tasks, their duties. He would take the deal to make it all go away. I turned to James. Do you understand this? He was already recording the conversation on his phone. Every word. I forwarded access to the security feed to Agent Patel with a short message. Happening now. Within 30 minutes, our house was surrounded by FBI vehicles. I watched from across the street as agents led Spencer and Murphy out in handcuffs. My phone rang. It was Agent Patel. She told me they had recorded them discussing the fraud scheme. Additionally, conspiracy, wire fraud, and attempted sale of property under false pretenses. We'll need an official statement from you. Of course, I said. And Mr. Briggs? Your wife just arrived at the scene. She's distressed. I looked out at the street. Emily was standing on our lawn, hands over her mouth, watching as FBI agents carried boxes of documents out of our home. What's happening to her? I asked. That depends on the circumstances, Patel said. What she knew and what you want. I watched Amelie for a long time. 13 years of marriage. Good years in the beginning, before it turned into this. I just want what's right, I finally said. The federal case moved quickly. Murphy and Spencer struck plea deals implicating each other and several other conspirators in what turned out to be a 3-state operation targeting military families. Amelie claimed she knew nothing of the larger plan. She said Murphy convinced her that I was hiding money, planning to leave her with nothing. Said the refinancing was his idea. She just went along with it. Maybe that was true. Maybe it wasn't. In any case, she agreed to a settlement, full restitution of the stolen funds, forfeiture of any claims to the house or my military pension, and a signed admission of forgery. In exchange, I wouldn't press charges. The divorce was finalized 6 months after that letter from Jalalabad. No fault. Clean break, given the circumstances. The day the final documents were signed, Agent Patel called me. Murphy Ryan was sentenced to 8 years in prison for fraud, conspiracy, and identity theft. Spencer received 12. Thought you'd want to know. Thanks, I said. There's one more thing, she added. We found evidence that they had been doing this to 11 other military families. Your case helped us build a pattern. Those families may get their money back because of you. After we hung up, I sat on the porch of my rented apartment, watching the sunset, thinking about those other families, other men who thought their homes and marriages were safe, only to return to emptiness. I hadn't planned to be the one to take down Murphy and Spencer's operation. I just wanted what was mine. But sometimes things turn out differently than you expect. My phone buzzed, a message from Amelie. I never wanted things to end up like this. I didn't respond. There was nothing to say. A year later, I sold the house. I couldn't live there anymore. Too many memories, too much betrayal in those walls. I used the money to buy a small cabin outside Missoula, Montana. 2 bedrooms, 10 acres of land, a creek behind it, and miles of no neighbors. I retired early from the Army. 20 years was enough. I had given enough. I got a dog, a German Shepherd named Scout. I started doing carpentry work for the locals. Nothing special, but it kept my hands busy and paid the bills. The rest was covered by my military pension. Sometimes I thought about Amelie, wondering where she ended up. James found out she moved back to her hometown in Oregon, working at another dental office. I guess she's starting over. I didn't hate her anymore. To be honest, I felt nothing for her. She made her choice, and I made mine. One evening, I received a letter from a woman in Fort Worth. Her husband was serving in the Navy when Murphy and Spencer tried to run their scheme on her. The FBI had mentioned my name in the case. You don't know me, she wrote, but you saved our home. Thank you for standing up when it would have been easier to walk away. I read it twice, then pinned it to the refrigerator. Sometimes when the silence became too loud and the memories too sharp, I looked at that letter and remembered that something good had come from all this. The last I heard, Murphy was still in prison. Spencer, too. The system worked for once. As for me, I was finding my way forward. One quiet day at a time, building something new, something that couldn't be stolen, forged, or betrayed. Something that was only mine.